10 dictators responsible for the most deaths. 10. Tianiste Bagosora, Rwanda, in office 1964 to 1994. Victims 1 million. Fate: died in prison hospital at 80. Bagosora was responsible for the 1994 genocide. Technically, he was not a ruler, but a military officer. But when the Rwandan president was killed in 1994, Bagosora had already formed the Interahamwe. These were militarized death squads, operating in every community. On his signal, they began massacring every Tutsi in the country. In just 100 days, around 1 million Tutsis were massacred. 9. Yakubu Gowon, Nigeria, in office 1966 to 1975. Victims 1.1 million. Fate: became a preacher, lives in Nigeria, aged 88. Gowon was head of state during the Nigerian Civil War. The eastern region of Biafra declared independence. In response, Gowon blocked all supplies. This led to a bloody 30-month war that killed 100,000 soldiers. About 1 million Biafrans starved to death. 8. Mengistu Haile Mariam, Ethiopia, in office 1977 to 1991. Victims 1.5 million. Fate: lives in Zimbabwe, aged 85. Mengistu led a military junta called the Derg. He began his rule with a terror campaign against dissenters. Tens of thousands of people were executed. Then Mengistu nationalized agricultural lands. This led to the 1983 to 1985 famine that killed over 1 million people. 7. Kim Il-sung, North Korea, in office 1948 to 1994. Victims 1.6 million. Fate: died at 82. Body on display in Pyongyang. Kim Il-sung established North Korea as a brutal communist dictatorship. His policies resulted in a famine. In 1994, Kim punished dissent through public executions and disappearances. His descendants are still running the country. 6. Pol Pot, Cambodia, in office 1975 to 1979. Victims 1.7 million. Fate: died at 72 under house arrest. After a Valium overdose, Pol Pot led the brutal Khmer Rouge movement. His government outlawed education, religion, and finance. Anyone who was already educated was executed. City dwellers were moved to forced communal farms. In 4 years, the regime killed a quarter of Cambodia's population. 5. Suharto, Indonesia, in office 1968 to 1998. Victims 2 million. Fate: died at 86, buried with honors. Suharto turned Indonesia into a military dictatorship, but his most infamous crime was committed earlier. Between 1965 and 1966, he led the Indonesian army. He perpetrated a campaign of mass killings. It was directed at anyone he considered disloyal. Up to 1.2 million people were slaughtered en masse. 4. Leopold II of Belgium, reign 1865 to 1909. Victims 15 million. Fate: died a king at 74. King Leopold's victims were all Congolese. He established the Congo Free State as his own private reserve. The native populations were enslaved to work at rubber plantations. Those who failed to meet the quotas were murdered or mutilated. 3. Adolf Hitler, Germany, in office 1933 to 1945. Victims 17 million. Fate: killed himself at 56. Hitler's hateful Nazi ideology fueled his crimes against the world. World War II alone brought enormous suffering, but the Holocaust was an unprecedented atrocity. Millions of Jews, Roma people, and other undesirables were killed. 2. Joseph Stalin, Soviet Union, in office 1929 to 1953. Victims 23 million. Fate: died in office at 74. The brutal communist leader enslaved and executed millions. Stalin organized massive purges and arbitrary terror. Millions of enemies of the people were imprisoned or executed. He also orchestrated the Holodomor, an artificial famine in Ukraine. It alone killed somewhere between 2 and 8 million people. 1. Mao Zedong, China. In office, 1949 to 1976. Victims, 78 million. Fate, died in office at 82. Mao launched a massive project called the Great Leap Forward. It resulted in 45 million deaths between 1958 and 1961, mostly from starvation. About 2.5 million people were beaten or tortured to death. In 1966, Mao launched the Cultural Revolution. It killed millions more.